You think clearly until you try to articulate what you are thinking. Then the thoughts scatter. The certainty you felt moments ago evaporates. You reach for words and find only vague impressions, half-formed ideas that felt solid in your head but crumble the moment you try to express them. This is not a communication problem, this is a thinking problem, because what you mistook for clarity was actually familiarity. You recognized patterns. You felt a sense of understanding, but you never actually thought it through. And now, forced to put it into words, you discover there was nothing concrete there to begin with. Just the feeling of knowing without the substance of knowledge. This happens more often than you realize. You hold opinions you cannot defend. You make decisions based on reasoning you cannot explain. You believe you understand things that, when pressed, you cannot describe. And the most dangerous part is that you do not notice. Your mind convinces you that the vague feeling of comprehension is the same as actual comprehension. It lets you nod along in conversations, participate in debates, form conclusions, all while operating on nothing but surface-level recognition and borrowed ideas you never truly examined. This is self-deception, and it is not occasional, it is constant. Your mind is lying to you every single day about what you actually understand. The cost of this is enormous. You waste time pursuing goals you never clearly defined. You argue for positions you never properly thought through. You build your life on assumptions you never questioned. And because you never forced yourself to think clearly, you never noticed that the foundation was unstable. Most people go their entire lives this way. They confuse the internal monologue with actual thinking. They mistake having thoughts for examining thoughts. They believe that because they can talk about something, they understand it. But talking is not thinking, and understanding requires more than the ability to repeat phrases that sound intelligent. There is a specific kind of fog that settles over your mind when you avoid clarity. You know something is off. You sense inconsistencies in your own reasoning. You feel uncertain even when you are claiming certainty. But instead of confronting that feeling, you ignore it. You push forward. You surround yourself with people who agree. You consume content that confirms what you already believe, and slowly, the fog thickens. You lose the ability to distinguish between what you actually know and what you just want to be true, between what you have thought through and what you have merely assumed. This is not stupidity, this is human nature, and it destroys clarity more effectively than any external force ever could. Richard Feynman understood this better than almost anyone. He was a physicist, yes, but more than that, he was a student of thought itself. He spent his entire career studying not just the natural world, but the way people think about the natural world, and what he discovered was disturbing. Most people, even highly educated people, even experts in their fields, do not actually think clearly. They think they do. They use sophisticated language. They reference complex theories. But when you strip away the terminology and ask them to explain what they actually mean, the clarity disappears. They were not thinking. They were performing the appearance of thought. And Feynman had no patience for performance. He built his entire approach around one brutal principle. The first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. This was not philosophy to him. It was survival. Because in physics, self-deception kills progress. If you believe you understand something you do not, you build on a false foundation. Everything that follows is worthless. So Feynman developed a method for cutting through his own self-deception, a way to test whether his thoughts were actually clear or just felt clear. And that method did not just make him a better scientist, it made him a better thinker, someone who could navigate complexity without losing himself in it, someone who could hold strong opinions while remaining genuinely open to being wrong. What Feynman recognized was that clarity is not natural. Your brain is not designed to think clearly. It is designed to think efficiently, to make quick judgments, to find patterns and act on them. And most of the time that is enough, but efficiency is not accuracy. Your brain will confidently tell you things that are not true. It will create narratives that feel coherent, but are not. It will give you the sensation of understanding without doing the work of actual understanding. And unless you actively fight that tendency, unless you force yourself to test your thoughts against reality, you will spend your life thinking clearly about nothing at all. The tragedy is that most people never realize this is happening. They go through life confident in their clarity. They make plans, they give advice, they judge others. all while operating on thoughts they never fully examined. And because everyone around them is doing the same thing, it feels normal. But normal is not the same as good. And Feynman refused to accept normal. He demanded more from himself. He refused to let his mind trick him into believing he understood something just because it felt familiar. And he developed a specific process for maintaining that honesty, a way to think that does not allow self-deception to hide. A method that exposes fuzzy thinking the moment it appears and forces you to either clarify it or abandon it. This is not about being smarter. Feynman was not smarter than everyone around him, but he was more honest. He was willing to admit when his thinking was unclear, willing to sit with confusion instead of pretending it away, willing to test his ideas in ways that might prove them wrong. And that willingness, that intellectual honesty, is what created his clarity. Not intelligence, not education, honesty. The kind of honesty most people avoid because it is uncomfortable, because it means admitting you were wrong, that you did not think it through, that what felt like insight was actually just noise. But that discomfort is the price of clarity. And if you are not willing to pay it, you will never think clearly about anything that matters. Right now, your mind is lying to you about something, maybe many things. You are holding beliefs you have not examined, making assumptions you have not tested, trusting thoughts you have not clarified. And those lies are shaping your decisions, your relationships, your future, not because you are dishonest, but because you never learned how to think without deceiving yourself. Feynman learned, and he left behind a method that anyone can use, a way to cut through the fog, to test whether your thoughts are real or just convincing, to build the kind of mental clarity that makes self-deception impossible. Not because you became perfect, but because you built a system that does not allow you to hide from the truth. Stay with me. What comes next is not abstract philosophy. It is a practical method for thinking clearly, for catching yourself in the act of self-deception and correcting it before it hardens into false certainty. This is not comfortable. It will force you to confront how often you are wrong, how much of what you believe is untested, how little of what you think is actually clear. But that confrontation is the beginning of real thinking. And real thinking is the only way to build a life that is not based on illusions. Feynman's method for mental clarity begins with a question that most people never ask themselves. Can I explain this thought out loud right now without hesitation? Not the general idea, not the vague sense of it, the actual reasoning, the specific steps that led you to this conclusion. And if you cannot, then you do not actually have a clear thought. You have an impression, a feeling, a belief that arrived in your mind through some process you never examined. And impressions are not thinking. They are just mental shortcuts pretending to be understanding. Feynman refused to accept shortcuts. He demanded full reconstruction. And reconstruction is where self-deception dies. Here is how it works in practice. You have a belief, an opinion, a decision you are considering. Instead of simply acting on it, you stop. You take out a piece of paper or open a blank document. And you write out the reasoning behind that belief as if you are explaining it to someone intelligent but unfamiliar with the topic. You cannot use vague language. You cannot say it just feels right. You have to articulate the actual logic, the evidence, the chain of reasoning that connects your premises to your conclusion. And the moment you try this, something uncomfortable happens. You realize how much of your belief was based on nothing. Most people avoid this exercise because they already sense what it will reveal, that their strong opinions rest on weak foundations, that their certainty is unearned, that they adopted a position because it sounded good or because people they respect held it, not because they actually thought it through. But Feynman welcomed this discomfort. He saw it as useful information. Every time he discovered fuzzy thinking in himself, he did not get defensive. He got curious. Where did this belief come from? What am I assuming? What evidence would change my mind? These questions are not attacks. They are tools. Tools for separating real thoughts from mental debris. The key is specificity. Self-deception thrives in vagueness. When you think in general terms, everything seems coherent. But the moment you force specificity, the illusion breaks. Feynman used this ruthlessly. If he caught himself saying something like "this approach is better," he would immediately ask better in what way? Better according to what standard? Better than what specific alternative? And if he could not answer with precision, he knew he was fooling himself. He was using a word that sounded meaningful but was actually empty, and empty words are where most self-deception hides. They let you feel like you are thinking when you are actually just stringing together pleasant-sounding phrases. Another technique Feynman used was teaching an imaginary skeptic. When he was working through an idea, he would imagine someone smart and critical sitting across from him, someone who would not accept vague answers, someone who would press him on every claim. And he would have a mental conversation with that person. If he made a statement, the skeptic would ask, "Why do you believe that?" And Feynman would have to answer, not with another vague statement, with actual reasoning, with evidence, with logic that held up under examination. And if it did not hold up, he would revise or abandon the idea entirely. Because holding on to a belief you cannot defend is not strength, it is stubbornness. And stubbornness is just self-deception wearing the mask of conviction. This process reveals something critical. Most of what you believe for bad reasons, not because you are foolish, but because belief formation is largely unconscious. You absorb ideas from your environment, from your parents, from your culture, from people you admire, and those ideas settle into your mind without ever being examined. They feel true because they are familiar, but familiarity is not evidence. And Feynman knew that the only way to separate true beliefs from inherited ones was to test them, to force yourself to articulate why you believe what you believe, and to be willing to discover that sometimes the answer is, "I do not actually know." One of the most powerful aspects of this method is that it exposes contradictions. Your mind is very good at holding incompatible beliefs as long as you never put them next to each other. You can believe that people are rational and also that advertising works. You can believe in free will and also that your behavior is shaped by your environment. You can hold both beliefs comfortably because you never examine them simultaneously. But when you write out your reasoning, when you force everything into the open, the contradictions become visible. And visible contradictions cannot be ignored. You have to resolve them, either by refining your thinking or by admitting you were wrong about something. And that admission is not weakness, it is progress. Feynman also insisted on testing ideas against reality whenever possible. Mental clarity is not just about internal coherence, it is about accuracy. You can have a perfectly logical argument built on false premises, and logic without truth is just elaborate fiction. So whenever he formed a belief about how something worked, he would ask, "What would I expect to see if this were true?" And then he would look, he would test, he would check whether reality matched his expectations, and when it did not, he would revise, not reality, his thinking, because reality does not care about your beliefs. It simply is. And any thought that contradicts reality is, by definition, wrong, no matter how clearly you can articulate it. This brings up an uncomfortable truth. You are wrong about many things right now. Not a few things, many things. Some of your core beliefs are false. Some of your confident judgments are mistaken. Some of your plans are based on flawed reasoning, and you will not discover this by thinking harder in the same way you have been thinking. You will only discover it by thinking differently, by forcing your thoughts into the open where they can be examined, by testing them against skepticism and reality, by being willing to feel the discomfort of realizing you were certain about something you never actually understood. That discomfort is the cost of clarity, and most people are not willing to pay it, so they stay confused, confidently, comfortably confused. Feynman paid that cost daily. He questioned his own ideas as ruthlessly as he questioned anyone else's. He did not give himself credit for good intentions or effort. He only cared whether his thinking was clear and accurate, and that standard kept him honest. It prevented him from falling in love with his own ideas, from defending positions just because he had stated them publicly, from confusing his identity with his beliefs, because when your identity is tied to being right, you cannot afford to be wrong. And when you cannot afford to be wrong, you stop thinking clearly. You start defending instead of examining, justifying instead of testing, and slowly, without noticing, you become the thing Feynman warned against, someone who is very good at fooling themselves. The method is simple but not easy. Every day, pick one belief you hold, something you are confident about, and write out why you believe it. Not what you believe, why. What is the evidence? What is the reasoning? What assumptions are you making? And then read what you wrote as if someone else wrote it. Would you find it convincing? Would it hold up to criticism? Are there gaps in the logic, places where you are assuming what you should be proving? And be honest, brutally honest, because the only person you are hurting with dishonesty is yourself. The world does not care if you are lying to yourself, but you should care, because every lie you tell yourself is a piece of reality you are ignoring, and ignored reality does not disappear. It just waits until it can hurt you. This practice will change how you think about everything. You will start noticing when you are being vague, when you are using words that sound meaningful but are not, when you are accepting conclusions without examining the path that led to them. And once you notice, you cannot unnotice. The self-deception becomes visible, and visible deception is much harder to maintain. You will catch yourself mid-sentence and realize you do not actually know what you are talking about. And that realization, humbling as it is the beginning of real clarity, because you cannot fix a problem you do not see, and most people never see how unclear their thinking actually is. They mistake the feeling of thought for the reality of it, but you will know the difference, and that knowledge will make you dangerous to confusion, including your own. Feynman lived this way until the end of his life, always questioning, always testing, always willing to be wrong if wrong meant getting closer to truth, and that willingness gave him a clarity that most people never experience. A mind that was not cluttered with beliefs he could not defend, ideas he had not examined, thoughts he had never clarified. He knew what he knew, and he knew what he did not know, and the space between those two was always shrinking because he was always working to expand the first and reduce the second. That is what mental clarity looks like. Not knowing everything, but knowing exactly where you stand, and being honest enough to admit when you do not. Once you start thinking this way, something shifts that you cannot reverse. You begin to notice self-deception everywhere, not just in yourself, in conversations, in news articles, in expert opinions, in political discourse. You see people confidently stating things they clearly have not thought through, using language designed to obscure rather than clarify, defending positions they inherited rather than examined, and you recognize it instantly because you have done the same thing. You know what intellectual dishonesty looks like from the inside, and now you can see it from the outside. This awareness does not make you superior. It makes you careful, because you know how easy it is to slip back into vague thinking, how seductive certainty feels even when it is unearned. Feynman called this intellectual honesty, and he believed it was rarer and more valuable than intelligence, because intelligence without honesty is just sophisticated self-deception. You can be brilliant and still be completely wrong if you are not willing to test your beliefs against reality. History is filled with intelligent people who believed absurd things because they never questioned their own thinking. They surrounded themselves with agreement. They dismissed criticism as ignorance. They mistook eloquence for truth. And they died confident in beliefs that were provably false. Feynman refused that path. He would rather be uncertain and accurate than certain and wrong, and that preference shaped everything about how he thought. The hardest part of this method is not the technique, it is the emotional cost. Being wrong hurts. Discovering that you have been confidently incorrect about something important feels like failure, and your ego will fight to avoid that feeling. It will give you excuses. It will tell you that the criticism does not apply to you, that your situation is different, that you have reasons others do not understand, and if you listen to those excuses, you will stay stuck. You will protect your ego at the expense of your clarity. Feynman understood this temptation. He felt it like anyone else, but he chose truth over comfort every single time. Not because it felt good, but because it was the only way to actually understand anything. This choice creates a strange kind of freedom. When you stop tying your identity to your beliefs, you stop needing to defend them. You can change your mind without feeling like you lost something. You can admit ignorance without feeling inferior. You can say, "I do not know," and mean it without shame. Because your value is not in always being right. It is in being willing to find out what is right. And that willingness makes you flexible, adaptable, capable of learning in situations where others are still protecting their egos. Feynman was famous for this. He could be corrected by a graduate student and respond with genuine curiosity rather than defensiveness, because he was not protecting an image. He was pursuing clarity, and clarity does not care about your status. Most people never experience this freedom. They spend their entire lives defending beliefs they never chose, protecting ideas they never examined, building elaborate justifications for positions they adopted unconsciously, and the weight of that is exhausting, because deep down, they know their reasoning is weak, they know they are avoiding certain questions, they know that if they were truly honest, they would have to admit they do not have it all figured out. But admission feels like defeat, so they keep performing certainty, and the performance becomes their prison. They cannot change because changing would mean admitting the performance was false, and that admission feels unbearable. Feynman showed that the opposite is true. Admission is not defeat, it is liberation. Every time you admit you do not know something, you free yourself from having to pretend. Every time you acknowledge that your reasoning was flawed, you open space to build better reasoning. Every time you let go of a belief you cannot defend, you make room for beliefs that actually reflect reality. This is not weakness. This is intellectual courage, and it is far rarer than the false courage of defending bad ideas simply because they are yours. Real strength is being able to say I was wrong about that, and then change direction without drama or shame. The long-term impact of thinking this way is profound. Over time, your beliefs become more accurate, not because you are smarter, but because you are filtering out the false ones. You are testing, revising, discarding what does not hold up. And what remains is a set of ideas that have survived scrutiny, ideas you can actually defend, ideas that reflect reality rather than wishful thinking. And those ideas become a foundation you can trust. Not perfectly, nothing is perfect, but well enough that when you make decisions based on them, those decisions tend to work. When you give advice based on them, that advice tends to help. When you explain them to others, people actually understand, because your thinking is clear, not because you are brilliant, but because you are honest. Feynman also understood that clarity is not a destination, it is a practice. You do not achieve perfect clarity and then stop. You maintain it through constant vigilance, because self-deception does not go away. It is always there, waiting for you to relax, waiting for you to skip the hard work of examination, waiting for you to accept a comfortable belief without testing it, and the moment you stop checking yourself, the fog returns. This is not pessimistic, it is realistic. Your brain is not designed to think clearly, it is designed to think quickly, and quick thinking means shortcuts, assumptions, biases, all the things that create self-deception. So you have to actively fight it, every day, with every important belief, with every significant decision. You have to ask yourself, am I actually thinking clearly about this, or does it just feel that way? This might sound exhausting, but it is the opposite. What is exhausting is living with unexamined beliefs that constantly contradict each other. What is exhausting is making decisions based on fuzzy thinking and then dealing with the consequences. What is exhausting is pretending to understand things you do not and constantly worrying that someone will expose you. Clarity is not exhausting. Clarity is relief, because when your thinking is clear, decisions become easier, conversations become simpler, confidence becomes earned rather than performed. You know where you stand, you know why you believe what you believe, and you know what would change your mind. That kind of clarity does not drain you, it energizes you. Feynman lived with that energy his entire life. He was endlessly curious, endlessly open to being wrong, endlessly willing to examine his own thinking. And that willingness kept his mind young even as his body aged. He never became rigid, never stopped learning, never fell into the trap of defending old ideas simply because they were old. He remained intellectually alive until the very end, not because he was special, but because he had a method, a way of thinking that did not allow self-deception to calcify into false certainty. And that method is available to you right now. You do not need permission. You do not need credentials. You just need the willingness to be honest with yourself, to test your beliefs, to examine your reasoning, to admit when you do not know, and to revise when reality proves you wrong. Start today. Pick one belief you hold strongly, something you are sure about, and write out why you believe it. What is the evidence? What is the reasoning? What are you assuming? And then read it as if you are trying to find flaws. Because there will be flaws. Not because you are stupid, but because all human thinking has flaws. The question is whether you are willing to find them and fix them, or whether you are going to protect them and pretend they are not there. That choice determines everything. It determines whether you grow or stagnate, whether you adapt or calcify, whether you live in reality or in a comforting illusion that will eventually shatter. Feynman chose reality, every single time. Even when it was uncomfortable, even when it meant admitting he was wrong, even when it contradicted something he wanted to believe. And that choice gave him a kind of clarity that most people never experience. A mind unclouded by self-deception, a foundation built on tested beliefs rather than inherited assumptions, a way of thinking that produced real understanding rather than the appearance of it. And now you know how he did it. Not through genius, through honesty, through a relentless commitment to not fooling himself, through a method that anyone can use if they are willing to pay the price of discomfort. If this resonates with you, if you recognize the self-deception in your own thinking and want to do something about it, come back. There are more tools, more ways to sharpen your mind, more methods for cutting through confusion and building clarity. Subscribe if you want to continue this work, not because I have all the answers, but because the questions matter, and asking them consistently is what separates clear thinkers from confused ones. Feynman never stopped asking, never stopped testing, never stopped being willing to discover he was wrong. And that restlessness, that intellectual humility combined with rigorous honesty, is what made him one of the clearest thinkers of his generation. You have the same tools, the same method, the same choice. Stop fooling yourself. Start thinking clearly. And watch how much of your life becomes simpler when your mind is no longer at war with reality.